Welcome, and we are so glad that you're here for another mental health and wellness chat. I'm Brittany, and I'm here with
Madison,
and we're two of your VC Counseling Center counselors.
an associate.
And we're here to have real conversations about the emotional challenges that students face and discuss navigating them. So today we're tackling a very heavy topic, supporting a friend who is grieving. So grief doesn't always look like tears, and we're going to go through that today. Grief might look like skipping class, zoning out, or even just saying I'm fine when we're obviously not fine. And it's when it's someone that you care about, knowing how to help can feel really overwhelming. So we wanted to offer this video to kind of explore some different ways that we could support someone going through grief, especially when we've never gone through it ourselves, and it can become kind of hard to understand what that's like.
Absolutely. Definitely a heavy topic, like you said, but an important topic that can help so many people. Like you said, grief can look different for a lot of people. That's going to be kind of a main point that we touch on in this episode. And just to kind of demonstrate how grief can look differently for different people, we have a little short kind of story, a few paragraphs that I was going to share with y'all just to represent grief and its messiness. It's not unique. It's unique to everyone. It's not the same. And that's what the story is going to represent. So whenever my dad died, the world didn't stop. The dining hall still served tacos on Tuesday. My group chat still buzzed with memes. Deadlines still loomed. Life, it seemed, didn't get the memo. I remember sitting in my dorm room the night after the funeral, surrounded by silence. My roommate had left me alone, which I appreciated until I didn't. My inbox was full of thinking of you messages, but my phone never rang. No one asked me to lunch. No one knocked. I don't blame them. Well, not really. Most people don't know what to do with grief, especially when it doesn't come with visible tears. I didn't cry in public. I still went to class, sometimes. I even laughed at social media 2 days later, and I think that confused people. Here's what I wish they knew. Grief didn't make me fragile, it made me heavy, like I was carrying around an invisible backpack filled with bricks. Memories, regrets, last words, the sound of my dad's laugh. I didn't need anyone to carry it for me. I just wanted someone to walk beside me while I held it. I wish they'd texted, even when they weren't sure what to say. Silence says more than you think. I wish they'd asked if I wanted to talk and still stayed when I said no. I wish they knew I wasn't trying to be distant. I was just trying to keep my head above water. I wish they understood that grief doesn't expire after the funeral or after the sympathy card stops. It lingers, it changes, but it never disappears. The friends who mattered most weren't the ones who said the perfect thing. They were the ones who sat with me when I had nothing to say at all. That's deep.
That's heavy, yeah, it is. And I loved this. When I was looking for, obviously we try to do most of our episodes with a guest or someone who can speak to the topic because I feel like it's a lot more insightful when we do.
For sure.
And this was one of those tough topics that I knew we weren't going to get anyone to volunteer to talk because it's such a heavy, deep emotional topic for people. And when I was looking for stories instead to share, because I figured next best thing, I loved this story because I feel like it really gives you an understanding of, I love the section about carrying around the invisible backpack, just carrying that heaviness all the time, because I feel like that's the biggest thing for people. And even touching on another section here of, I want people to understand that grief doesn't expire after the funeral. It lingers, it changes, but it never disappears. Because I feel like this is such a common experience people have, is that, that feeling, the grief never really goes away for most people, especially about someone you care about.
Yeah.
It's just about finding a new way to reorganize that relationship to, it is something that is long-term, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to get at.
Absolutely.
That's why I loved that story. And today, really, one of our biggest things here to remember when we talk about supporting someone, is empathy and a certain level of understanding of what they're going through, right?
Yeah.
Grief is not just sadness. At the end of the day, grief is its own complex monster to a degree, right? It's the memories, it's having to change our schedule and routine depending on the person. Like in the example, when a parent passes away, it's such a life altering event for every person that goes through that.
Yes.
Even if you have a terrible relationship with that parent, it still impacts someone's life significantly.
For sure.
And like we said, depending on our proximity to the person, depending on how close we are to them, whether they're a partner or they're a friend or they're someone that we only engage with 1 or 2 times, grief has its impact to varying degrees, usually based
Absolutely.
on how close we are to them, right?
Yeah.
And there's lots of different reactions that someone could have. And the list is limitless. I always tell people there's no right or wrong way to grieve. There's healthy and unhealthy ways, but ultimately it kind of is what it is for you.
Yes.
Sometimes people, like in the story, have total silence. They don't talk through it. They don't process it at all. They don't even acknowledge that it happened to people around them.
Mm-hmm.
Anger is another common one that can happen, and usually part of the phases that we go through afterwards. It's normal to have a certain level of anger.
Absolutely. Another big one I've heard is guilt or regret. Maybe there's something that they did or didn't do, something they said or didn't say.
Yeah.
In a way, they almost feel somewhat responsible for contributing to the loss.
Yeah.
And that's huge. That's a hard thing to carry with you.
And those are hard conversations to have
They
too with
are.
people. Even the numbness, seeming fine. I mean, going about our daily routine, kind of like in the story, there is no typical grief response for people. And
No.
that's kind of what we want to normalize here is grief looks different for everyone. And a lot of the times with grief, the good news is that most of the time, with enough time, we end up back at some semblance of normal again,
Mm-hmm.
right? The emotions, grief has a way of naturally working through itself. So a lot of supporting someone is supporting them, like just kind of being there. And we'll get to that. But so I also want to point out grief is not linear or timed. There's been recent changes in the field of psychology to add prolonged grief as an actual disorder in the DSM.
Mm-hmm.
So we're recognizing that sometimes some people have a very intense reaction to grief. But grief is absolutely not linear. It's all over the place. It's messy 99%
Yes.
of the time. And there is no time frame, right? And I hear this a lot from people. They'll say, I should be over this by now.
Mm-hmm.
I should be further along than I am. I
Yeah.
shouldn't still be crying every day. I shouldn't, should.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, like we've said, it's so different for each person, right? I've had people that, a spouse passed away and a year later, they still can't bring themselves to even go through their clothes or their belongings. They're still sitting there exactly where they left them. And I've had
Mm-hmm.
other people that a spouse passes away and they've already done that within a week. It's just case by case basis of
Yes.
what feels good for them.
Absolutely. Such an individualized process. And there's people that will tell me, like you said, it's been years since they passed. Why am I still feeling this way? Why are these emotions so strong and, overwhelming for me? It's because that person mattered so much to you. Like, no matter how much time passes, there's always going to be emotions that come up for you when you think about that loss.
Yeah.
So, give yourself grace with that.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it takes a long time.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you might expect tears from people because that's kind of what we expect with a grief response in culture and movies and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, right? But, your friend or whoever you're trying to support might just want to binge Netflix and say absolutely nothing. And that's
Yep.
okay too. Even if, like in the story, even if it's just existing in the same space together, sometimes that's what people need.
Yes.
And, we don't know. So, we'll do our best to compile in general, and this is by no means a comprehensive list because, like we've said, it's so individual, but some general guidelines, right? Do's and don'ts of supporting someone who is grieving in a moment. So some of the things that can usually be helpful for most people is to simply just show up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Physical, emotional presence matters. And this is going to depend on the friendship too, and whatever that looks like for you guys. But, just showing up for them, even if it's just a text of saying, hey, how are you doing today? Or even if it's just going to class when you know that they're going, or waiting for them outside their class to just say, hey, I wanted to say good morning, let's talk. Just showing up and putting in that effort to be there can be a really solid place to start.
Absolutely. Even if they're not ready to, hang out with you or talk about what happened, just like putting it out there that, hey, I'm checking in with you. I'm here for you if you need me. Even if you just want to go grab coffee, we just sit in silence.
Yeah.
That presence is better than doing nothing, right? And just not reaching out. So yeah, presence is huge.
Absolutely. And even another big one that I like to encourage people to consider, and once again, depends on the nature of the relationship, but a big one can be offering actual concrete help in some way.
Yes.
So a lot of times whenever we experience a significant loss, I like to think of people falling into two categories, right? There are people who are fixers. And whenever there's a loss, they're like, okay, let's plan this. Let's do this. Let's get this done. Let's, take care of the funeral. Let's get everybody together. I would definitely want to do a memorial. They're very problem focused, right? They're trying to solve things.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people that are more emotional focused who it's not uncommon for them to shut down or to be so emotional that they can't problem solve. So especially when someone's coping in a very emotion focused way, which is totally fine, it can be so helpful to give concrete help. And I'm not saying, texting and asking, can I bring you food? Just cook some food and take it over. Worst case, it gets thrown away, because most of the time, if you ask me, can I do this or what do you want? I have to put a lot of effort into thinking and to deciding. And a lot of times when we're in a very emotional place, it's easier to just ignore it. Yeah. So just bringing it, delivering it, leaving it, walking away can sometimes be very helpful. Because like I said, worst case, they throw it away. They don't want it. But best case, that's one less thing they had to worry about today to, cook or do these things that are just too much for me right now.
Yeah. Like you said, it can feel so overwhelming to even do the most basic things in your routine. So to have somebody who can kind of get in there with a problem solving attitude, I'm at your doorstep with a casserole. Like that's what those people going through grief need in those moments.
And not demanding answers either, there's a difference between coming at someone and saying, do you want me to get you class notes? Do you want me to talk to the professor for you? Do you want me to do this, this, and this? No, just take the step and take extra notes for them in class. Make sure you take extra good notes because you know that eventually they're going to need them. And then holding on to them or delivering them to them and saying, hey, when you're ready to look at class again, don't worry, I got you. I took really detailed notes for you and I have those for you when you're ready for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So obviously just respecting their boundaries is a really big thing as well. Wanting to ask rather than assume.
And like we talked about in other episodes, right? It's always best to ask people directly. What do you need? What can help right now too? And even asking your friend, how can I support you right now? And even if the answer is, I don't know. Okay. Would it be helpful if I sat with you and just in silence? Do you want to scroll on our phones together? They'll let you know what they want or don't want, or they might say, I don't want anybody here right now. Can you please leave? Okay, awesome. Then give them their space, So always respect their boundaries and always, if you're questioning or you're doubting, just a simple question. It can be helpful to frame it even like, do you want me to, and give them options. So do you want me to leave or do you want me to sit in silence with you? Because then it makes that decision easier for them.
And the biggest part of it is just that open communication is there, no matter how they respond, whether it's something big or small. Yeah. At least you're trying to be there for them and make their life easier during this extremely devastating time.
Yeah. And then making sure that we're checking in as often as we can too, especially when we care about them. It is a dance of giving space and time, but also checking in a way that doesn't have a lot of pressure loaded behind it and is also supportive and caring and loving.
Yeah, because I think in that story, it said, I got a lot of texts, but I didn't get any calls. And sometimes, it might be kind of hard to know, should I call? Do they want to talk? But just do it. You never know until you try. And maybe that's exactly what that person is in need of.
Yeah. And even like the story said too, it changes so quickly a lot of times for people as well. There's phases where it's not uncommon for people to want a lot of space and then suddenly start craving some type of human connection. Yeah. And it can be hard to reach out. Another thing I hear a lot from people who are grieving is, a lot of times all they really want to do is talk about the person or their thoughts or memories. And sometimes in our lives, it's hard to do that because we can feel like this is all that I talk about. They're tired of hearing about it. I know that they're tired of telling me. And another big one too, even is I'll hear people say, I ran into someone and they told me this really great story about the person that passed. And it made me so happy. And I wish people did that more, but people don't know. People just get so uncomfortable when someone's grieving.
Be hard. But sometimes that's something that we encourage people to do is like, tell us your favorite memories about them. Tell us your stories about them. That's something that gives them joy to talk about those moments.
Yeah. So even if it's just opening up a space for them to tell you memories or things that they remember. And I think just the biggest point to take from here is just it's so hard to give a list of this is how you should handle this situation because every person's situation is so different. Maybe it's easier if we just talk about what probably usually definitely doesn't help for most people,
Yeah.
right? Trying to fix it. And I say this with love, care, and concern, though, because I understand, someone you love is upset, they're crying, there's something that's outside of their control. I mean, what can you do when you lose someone, right?
Yeah.
When you're supporting someone, there's not much that you can do or control here, which is uncomfortable for a lot of us, right? And
it's hard.
Ultimately, you're not going to fix it. You're not going to fix it. You're
No.
probably not going to make them feel better, honestly.
Yeah.
And I know that that's uncomfortable for us to sit with, is this feeling that I am, useless in this situation, but you're not. And when we try to fix it by saying, things like, oh, you'll feel better soon, or this will pass too, or whatever it is, sometimes, like we've talked about before on this podcast, that can be very minimizing for people. So one helpful tip can even be going into this conversation or interaction, telling myself it is not my job to fix what they're feeling, because I am not going to, because they have a right to be devastated by this loss. I'm simply here to support them, whatever that looks like. So getting out of that fix it mindset can be very beneficial.
Yeah, it can be very easy to put that responsibility on ourselves, to feel like, oh, what can I do to help make this not so difficult for them? What can I say?
Or make them happy.
Yeah. And it's like, there's a good chance there is nothing. That's why we go back to just that presence of you being there is the best thing you can do in that situation. Nothing is going to take that pain, that anger, whatever that emotion is, away, but there's things we can do to support them through that. And I think that's the big difference there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just you saying, you kind of gave some examples of some things not to say, just kind of piggybacking off that. The cliche of everything happens for a reason is not very helpful at all in situations like that. Definitely can minimize it. Definitely just kind of invalidates their feelings.
Yeah. And I hear this a lot from people that are grieving too, and especially in complicated grief where we're grieving, for a long period of time, how frustrating it can be for some people to hear the same response from everyone. So while you're saying what feels good for you, that person has heard that response 100 times by now. And yes, a lot of times, like, we understand, like, I get it. What else are you going to say in that moment, right? But ultimately, I think it's more about continuing the conversation after that point. So even if that's the best that we can come up with is, hey, everything happens for a reason, but tell me about your dad. Tell me about your husband or whatever, can be a good segue into an actual conversation. Because if I tell you, hey, Madison, don't worry about that, everything happens for a reason, it kind of shuts the conversation down.
It does. Like, what do I say to that? Like,
like, how do you even respond to something?
Yeah, like that's not what you want to hear. Like, this is just the most devastating thing that could have happened in your life. And like, no, this didn't have to happen. Actually, I wish it wouldn't have happened. I can't find a reason for why this would have occurred. That's a hard one to hear.
And a big thing too, I see this a lot with people that come on how to support someone. They'll say, I'm so scared of saying the wrong thing and breaking them, basically, which, we need to chill. Like, you're not going to break someone at the end of the day. The grief is, hard enough to deal with.
Yeah.
I think this belief that we're going to, break someone in some way, or we're going to say the wrong thing and make everything worse. Bottom line, if we're being real, things can't really get worse at this point a lot of the times. And, being there for someone is the best thing that we can do. So, I mean, trying not to disappear and kind of sitting with that discomfort, right? Because that is the question of, what is it about grief that makes me so uncomfortable that I don't even want to interact with this person because I'm so uncomfortable? You know what I mean? So even doing that self-work of kind of exploring, what is it about this that makes me so uncomfortable? And if it is that I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong thing, this ties back into the first point, this pressure that we feel to fix it or make it better or do the right thing in some way. There is no right, the right thing is supporting the person that you love, bottom line. So how can I do that instead?
Yeah. And even if it doesn't come out the right way, initially, there's things that we can use this as a learning experience. Like you said, keep that conversation going. Don't just start with everything happens for a reason and then disappear for weeks, Yeah.
And if we have been through grief of our own, that's a good point that we can use to relate to other people and say, hey, I know what you're going through. I also lost my husband, parent, whatever. which is great. Like, absolutely relate with other people, but also watching to make sure that we're not making it about us in that moment either. So there's a difference between me coming to Madison and saying like, hey, Madison, I'm so sorry to hear about, your whoever. I've also been through that too. Let me tell you about my grieving process. And I talk for an hour and never give her a chance to jump in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think it can be a difference between, I went through something similar. These are some things that maybe worked for me, or these are some things I did, keeping it, brief, while also letting them have their moment to talk as well. But yeah, dominating the conversation and overshadowing what they're going through, that can be really hard to hear from someone who is actively going through a loss. So definitely.
That's what we say too. You don't have to have an answer. For example, it could, it could even look something like me saying, Madison, I heard about who you lost, and I'm so sorry to hear that. When I lost my whoever, it was so hard for me to even get out of bed.
Yes.
And just leave it at that. And then Madison can chime in and say, my God, me too. Like, I'm barely out of bed right now. And we're conversating, and I'm supporting, and I'm also like normalizing for her that like, I also struggled so much with my loss too. So that's why I say there's a difference between me bringing it up to make it about me and me bringing it up to help her, realize she's not alone.
Yeah, to bond through that experience, because so often, like we were saying earlier, we do have these thoughts like, why am I still feeling this way? Why can't I get back to my routine? And just to hear someone else say, hey, I've been through this. It sucks, but it does eventually get better. That can be really encouraging for them to hear.
And this is a really great plug too. Something like our grief group here on campus can be very helpful for this too, because a lot of times, and even encouraging people to come in your life, or even coming with them and saying like, hey, you want me to go with you? And I'll just kind of sit quietly and support you, because that's appropriate. And we will totally let you sit in and support someone.
Yes.
Because, it can be so isolating to feel like I'm the only one suffering this much. So going to a group with other people who are in the same exact scenario and talking about, hey, it's been, 4 years since I lost my husband and it still impacts me every day. That can be so freeing for a lot of people to know that like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just, grief is hard and it's tough.
Absolutely. And it can make it really hard to take that first step towards getting help, because it can be kind of hard to find that fine line between, okay, this is a normal reaction to my grief versus, okay, this is really starting to impact me in ways that are not helpful for my life. So sometimes just being there, going with your friend to that group, sitting with them, just like we said, that presence is huge for helping them get on their path to healing. Yeah.
And this is such a big thing too, because we have people come to counseling all the time with like this expectation that, I'm going to tell you something magical to tell someone, or I'm going to help you like write a script to like have conversations, which we absolutely cannot do. Unfortunately, that would be so cool if we could, but we cannot. So all this to say too, remember, like, you're not a therapist, and that's okay because no one's expecting you to respond like a therapist would.
No.
You're their friend, and that's powerful enough. And that matters arguably sometimes more than being someone's therapist. You're someone that's there because they want to be there and they make the choice to be there. So definitely keep an eye on those expectations we have for ourselves that, you're not going to say something life-changing and life-altering. That's not the expectation. The expectation is simply to support this person.
Yes. Support rather than fix, take away what they're feeling. Yeah. And so with that, sometimes we do have this expectation as a friend to, like we were saying, fix the situation, take away what they're feeling. But it's also important that we're caring for ourselves whenever we are supporting people who are going through a hard time, because secondary grief and emotional fatigue are very real experiences that people have. Like what I've said before, whenever we're near someone who might be stressed or angry or sad, that can rub off on us sometimes. And that can become really difficult for us as well.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and that this isn't starting to dominate our lives as well.
And it is really tough. And even I have a personal example I can speak to on that. Like, whenever my husband's dad passed, I mean, he was basically emotionally useless, understandably so, because that's a lot to unpack for a person, especially when you don't have the best relationship with that person. There's a lot of grief, there's a lot of guilt, like you said, that come up in that. And that was his experience. And so for me, being someone trying to support someone in that scenario, I feel like it was really hard because given that he was so unable to do the things that needed to be done. That became my responsibility, right? Because, I'm obviously less affected. I can think more clearly. I'll take care of all of this for you. Don't you worry.
Mm-hmm.
It became a nightmare emotionally for me of,
Mm-hmm.
Trying to figure, because this is the first time someone has passed in my life too, where I'm the adult in the room in charge of service, of cremation, of all of these weird things that I had never done before,
Right.
which that was overwhelming. But then also having this pressure of doing all of these things and doing them correctly and doing them in a supportive, respectful way
Yes.
became a massive weight. Which was it, there was a lot of emotional fatigue. Like, no, I wasn't impacted significantly by the death itself because we weren't very close, but that emotional fatigue of checking in on him, making sure he's okay, while also coordinating this entire massive thing was just, it was a lot.
Yeah.
So sort of say a lot of times we just hyperfunction and we get through it and focus on the things that need to be done and problem solve and never really stop to check in and say, am I even okay? Even though this isn't grief that I'm upset about, am I even okay trying to manage all of this? So yeah, definitely checking in with yourself, taking care of yourself, and making sure that we're setting boundaries where appropriate and also supporting ourselves through this process with self-care or, taking a break from it. So it's so important to check in with yourself too while we're supporting someone else, because it's easy to make it all about them, as we should and we do, because we care about them.
Yeah. But after we're done supporting them, talking to that person for the day, like, let's be intentional about how we're spending the rest of our time. Like you said, that self-care can be so important. Maybe that looks like watching a funny show or going out in nature, just something to get your mind and your, focus on something meaningful.
Yeah.
Because it can feel hard. You can really easily get sucked into that grief.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and obviously we're biased. We always come back to, seek out professional help, a support group, when and if this does become appropriate and helpful for you. And that's the question. How do I know when that would be helpful? Well, you know, we always come back to the same answer here, and the answer is always going to be the same whenever it keeps me from living life and I feel like I can't manage it anymore. It's so subjective, right? Yes, there are some times where obviously, like, if we're having thoughts of hurting ourselves, hurting others, if we're hearing or seeing things that other people aren't and it's impacting our life, like, yes, those are times where you should definitely be coming. If you feel like you can't function, get out of bed, do the things that you need to do. If you feel like you are drowning, that would probably be a good sign. Let me just go talk to someone. It's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah.
And, also in that conversation, we can let okay, given what you're saying, what's going on, one time a month coming in and checking would be probably appropriate for you. So we can even participate in that discussion of whether or not you really need to be here and what you could get out of it, at the end of the day. So definitely.
Absolutely. And I think also just looking at it from a time frame perspective, like we said, it's going to be normal to feel off, sad, angry, all those emotions for a decent portion of time. But if you found that it's years and it's still having a really extreme impact on you, that might be when it's time to get that extra help. You feel like your emotional, ability to just regulate your emotions is you're crying at like the drop of a hat, or it's really impacting how you show up in your life. That can also be a really big sign as well.
And I can already hear you guys like, how do I even suggest someone gently that maybe they should consider counseling? And it can be as simple as, I wonder if it would be helpful for you to talk to someone who's trained to have these conversations, or even just mentioning that, hey, counseling is free at the counseling center here on campus. You might want to go check that out. Or I heard they had a grief therapy group on Mondays. I'll go with you if you want to go. Let's go check it out together. We don't have to overcomplicate this at the end of the day, for sure.
Absolutely.
So in closing, once again, I'm going to say it again because it's worth repeating. It's okay to not have the answers. You will not have the answers, and that's fine. All that we're doing is supporting and being there in whatever, and showing up for the person that we care about in whatever way is most appropriate for them, for our relationship. Just going to asking myself, how could I support them right now? And if I don't know, ask.
What do you need? That's the magic question that we always come back to. It can really open the door to allow you to support them in the best way.
Yeah.
So, grief is a process, and so is learning how to support someone through it. It's a learning experience. It's something that's going to take time. So remembering to be patient with yourself, whether you're the person who's going through the grief or someone who's supporting them. Like we said, we're not always going to have all the answers, but there is ways that we can be there for that person and help them get through this journey so they're not alone.
Yeah. And even if you've done this before, even if you've supported someone who was grieving before, it's going to look different for each person in your life, because we all cope so differently, especially with grief. We all manage grief in different ways. And even you're going to experience different grief between different people that you lose in your life too. So it's always such a varied process for each individual time that it happens. And that's just the name of the game at the end of the day. So our final takeaway today: you don't need the perfect words.
Nope.
Just be there. That's what matters most.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us today in your go-to space for honest conversations about mental health and well-being. We're your hosts, Madison
and Brittany,
and we're glad that you spent part of your day with us. Remember that taking care of your mind is just as important as taking care of your body. Be kind to yourself, reach out if you need support, and know that you're never alone. Until next time, take care and take a deep breath.